everybody. This is session number 300. No, just kidding. I think it's session 28. And I'm very happy to welcome Bruno. Bruno is, besides many things that he will tell us, he's one of the inventors of the famous game called Playing Lean, which is, let's say, a better way to learn Lean Startup without probably reading the book from page 1 to first page 300. Just play the game and learn the techniques, and then if you are curious, read the book carefully and then try to create your own business inside a large corporation, because it's easier than using your own money. I'm just kidding. And today we are going to talk about something really important: how to innovate in turbulent times, in unprecedented times, which is what we are living at the moment. So I think everybody here is curious to learn how to do that. What's the silver bullet, if there is a silver bullet? But over to you, Bruno. You are the star today, so the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you. Is it Hugo or Hugo?
Well, my grandmother calls me Hugo. In Portuguese, Hugo. In English, it's Hugo.
Okay. Well, I won't try to channel your grammar. I'll just go with English pronunciation. So, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here with other fellow practitioners, which is something very close to my heart, and I'm very happy to be here. And it's kind of before jumping in what Hugo was talking about, kind of, and what we will discuss today, just to give you a little bit of framing about myself, so you can understand where my comments are coming from and what I will be focusing on, so it's easier for you to see where my bias is. In general, my background is I'm an engineer by trade. I used to study industrial engineering and I used to work in defense. That's where I started. And while I was working there, I realized that I'm really, really curious about the systems, not just the actual products and services, but actually how they interact with everything else that's related to them, how we get to sell them, how we get to talk about them. Because innovation is much more than product or technology or service. And I got to learn that through some failures and successes. So that's something I'll be sharing today. And over the years, I worked in defense, entertainment, financial services, education. I also worked a lot with startups, founders. I stopped counting after I worked with more than 1,467. That's when I stopped the count. And marrying all this knowledge and processes together is kind of what I'm doing today. So I'm mostly focusing on large corporates, and that's what I'll be sharing today is from the perspective of corporate innovation during turbulent times in larger organizations, because they have different problems than smaller organizations and startups. So if you look in the revolutions that have been happening in the innovation as a process, innovation as an industry, as approach in the last decade or so, has been connected to how our approach to entrepreneurship has been developing. So there was a big boom in lean startup, customer development, then design thinking approaches. Everything was happening at a similar time and was reaching a confluence together. And then we've seen that thinking jumping to how we do innovation. At the same time, what was happening in the manufacturing world, lean manufacturing, then that inspiring the agile development and the whole family of approaches, then jumping also to the world of innovation. So in the last decade, we have seen a lot of different approaches coming together. Sometimes like this, sometimes like this. And I see it as part of our responsibility as practitioners to kind of really weed out and make sure that we take what's useful and relevant to create value and make a world a better place and leave behind what wasn't so useful. And one of the things that made the big boom from Steve Blank was when he came to realization that startups are not smaller units of big organizations, which was groundbreaking. Today we say, of course, that sounds very obvious. But what happened if you look at Harvard Business Review, if you look at a lot of academia, consulting agencies, they started talking about, innovate like a startup, develop products like a startup, develop business like a startup. Now we have to say the opposite is also not true. A big company is not just a bigger version of a startup. It's not, a baby does not turn into a bigger baby. A baby grows into a young adult, an old person, etc. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it is something I've been seeing in the organizations when they start tripping over themselves. Since this is Innovation Cafe, I have not brought any slides because I think it would be silly to bring slides to cafe. So I'll be talking, and I prepared what I believe are 5 kind of best practices that I have observed right now in the last 9 months, working with larger organizations when it comes to innovation. And I would like to invite you to write in the chat, write your own notes, write your own questions, whatever, because I would like us to discuss this until the time runs out or Hugo says, get out. Okay. So I see already the chat button growing red, but I will check it out a bit later. So feel free to continue writing. And if there's something like really, really burning, just unmute yourself and say, Bruno, stop. Bruno, stop. Cool? Cool. I see one, at least one thumb up. So first thing I would want to talk about is really, really big mistake I keep seeing, especially with larger companies, is trying to weather the storm by kind of burying down and trying to lock themselves away. That's rooted in basically middle age thinking. When there was a kingdom under attack, then they would raise the drawbridges, they would go into the castles, they would take their supplies, and they would wait for the attacker to come and break on their walls. That was the purpose of castles. But then, how war is waged changed, and armies started going around the castles. They would burn down the farms, they would destroy the rest of the kingdom. So, bravo, you survived in a castle, but you have nothing left. Maybe you will wait until the pandemic is over, but when you come out, you will see, like, actually everything changed. We are not there anymore. So that is something, it is silly, and especially looking at big organizations, because they have a lot of options to survive. They can go into more debt, they can cut salaries across the whole organization. So even a 5% salary cut, which will not ruin anyone's life in the organization, given that they're paying proper salaries, will extend the life of the organization for meaningful amount of time. But that is all for waste if the organization is just going like this, kind of, we are doing all these activities, but we are going to do everything as we did before. So that ties into the second best practice. So kind of, don't ignore what's happening, accept that the reality is different. What does that mean is that, I mean, I don't need to tell you about pet projects. Every large organization has them. Every manager has several pet projects. But this is a unique opportunity to really put down all the projects on the line, not just innovation, but everything that's happening in the organization, and starting going through them. Okay, the world is a different place. We don't need to kill things, but maybe we need to postpone things. For example, one client I was working with had several projects that in their business model were extremely reliant on physical distribution and physical presence. It is a fair thing to stop and say, okay, let's discuss this again. We have several options. So the world is changing. Nobody knows how the world will change. We can engage in scenario thinking, etc., but that doesn't change today. So what do we want to do? Do we want to use the creativity to try to change these innovations, to try to change these projects, to maybe remove the physical aspect? Do we want to put them on hold and put these people to work on something else? This is just one trivial example, but it's important to have these discussions, because if you delay them, you're basically increasing the cost of the decision. So if you could make a decision today, but you delay it for 6 months and it doesn't change, you might end up making much costlier decision that will be the same as today. So it's important to accept the reality as it is, not say, okay, we're going to get run over. But if you don't accept that the world is different right now, then it's very difficult to make any changes. And then point number 3 is not something that's related just to the pandemic, but it's a great excuse to start stressing it again and again and again. Is that really, I mean, what is innovation? Maybe I should have said that in the beginning. So everybody in this room probably has at least 2 to 3 definitions of innovation. So I will share the one that I use and I operate with. I'm not claiming this is the perfect one or the one to replace them all, but I think it's important to share it so you know what I'm thinking when I say innovation. So for me, innovation is something new that creates value. It's very broad, but at the same time, it has 2 important words: new and creating value. When I say new, I don't mean novel, never seen to the world before, but new to the person creating it and to the person receiving it. So if the two of us are doing something together, if neither of us has ever seen it, to me, that is innovation. And value determined as you, the recipient, not what I think that the value should be or that value is. My job as innovator is to create value, but your job as a customer is to validate that value. So that was a bit of a sidetrack. So the point number three that I have seen, and none of you are going to be shocked and surprised, and we need to keep stressing that, is really innovation, especially now, must be focused on the customer. Now is not the time to fight, turf wars, to fight political games, to do other weird stuff like, oh, we need that, but the budgeting process is like this, so now is perfect time to go and apply for budget, even though we don't know for who is it for, but maybe, like, find something in the market, find a sexy startup to collaborate with, or just come up with an idea. Now is really not the time for that. So really, innovation should always, but especially now, be obsessed with customer and value creation, value determined from the customer's point of view. Moving into the fourth point, because innovation again can be on multiple fronts. Like when we talk about business model innovation, just taking, for example, the business model canvas, you have the 9 blocks: customer segments, value proposition, customer relationship, customer channels, key partners, key activities, key resources, revenue streams, cost structure. You can innovate on each one of those, and you can innovate on relationship between each one of those, and you can innovate between multiple relationships. You can innovate with multiple business models. So really, there is nearly infinite number of combinations that you can innovate with. Why am I saying this? Now, in these times, what's most important is to focus on innovations with highly relevant revenue capabilities. So there needs to be promising revenue generation. Why am I saying that? So if you look at cost reduction initiatives, like technology, back-end investment, infrastructure investments, for large organizations, those are make or break investments. So kind of if you're talking about changing ERP system, changing the banking backend, that's like open heart surgery. If you don't do it right, you die. Those are level of investments that are paid back in 20 to 30 years. Yes, that's something you should be doing, but not what you should be focusing on in this moment. Instead, what's better is to focus on revenue generating innovations. And now here comes the kicker. And this is something that probably a lot of innovation guys will go like, oh, Bruno, you can't say that. So, but I'll say it anyway. Right now, and evidence over the decades of research and the numbers from the companies, incremental innovation is the best investment. Radical, disruptive, transformational, it's all crap investments. It's kind of, it's important to invest in those type of innovations, but it's kind of more, think of it investing in your future, but it will not feed you today. And right now, if you're in a situation where your house is burning down, someone is screaming on the outside, and you're fighting for your life, it's not time to swing drunkenly for the fences. You want to go for the things that you have a good feeling that's based in what you know how to do, and then strike at 1 to 2 things that you want to change. It's a subtle but important difference. When we look at so I said I come from the industrial engineering background, from lean manufacturing. And lean, or Toyota production system, and later lean manufacturing, inspired a lot of agile thinking, which probably all of you are familiar. So something happened there in translation and talking about it. So there was a lot of emphasis on waste, and there was a lot of emphasis on cost reduction. So what people sometimes confuse, and I want to stress this because it's such an important difference, is that cost reduction in lean comes as a side effect of focusing on value creation. Cost reduction comes as a side effect of focusing on value creation. I repeated that twice because it's such subtle yet such profound distinction. So of course cost reduction is important. Of course waste elimination is important. But the mindset of focusing on increasing value instead of reducing cost is the difference between wealth and abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. One is fear and heavy in the belly. Another one is liberating and opens. It helps you actually see, okay, I'm not trying to penny pinch. I'm not, losing dollar over saving cents, but I'm actually looking, I'm obsessing. How can I create additional value? Now is the time for that. That's why I say now focusing on incremental innovation that's revenue generating. I'm not saying drop transformational, drop disruptive. If you have units, we're talking large corporates, if you have units that are focusing on that, let them continue focusing on that. But again, tell them, if you have a disruptive unit or something, tell them, okay, continue focusing on that, but please give additional priority to revenue generating disruptive ideas, not kind of the things where we will implement blockchain and that will change how we identify our customers. Great. But that's back-end infrastructure. That's not revenue generating. That was just an example. And a fifth one, and then I see a lot of 11 to be correct. Fifth one, which I believe is important and easily overlooked. So I was a little bit shocked. When was it? So a few months after lockdown started globally and all the countries basically around March, and then there was one group that did a research. I think it was 3 months later, that was looking into, it was based on sample size of 6,000 professionals and employees in USA. So they were looking at how did the work habits change in 3 months. And what they found was that on average, people are working 3 hours longer. On average. Can you imagine that? On average, 3 hours longer every day. 6,000 people, sample size. So what's really important is now it's easier to burn out than ever. So you have very difficult situation. People are under a lot of pressure. They try to compensate by working longer, not because necessarily they love work, but just because that's kind of a heaven. So point number 5 is that I strongly believe that large organizations have additional responsibility towards their employees. Of course, it's employees that create the environment, but take care of yourself and take care of your colleagues and peers. So I'm not here talking about therapy. You shouldn't do that. That's for professionals to do that work. But actually giving permission first to yourself, if you're a regular employee, to work the hours that you're supposed to work. You don't need to work longer. If your boss sends you an email at 11 p.m., maybe he's just sending you that because then when he's on his phone, you don't need to answer immediately. If you are a leader, if you're a boss, think about the small things you do. If you send a Slack message outside of the work hours, if you send an email outside of the work hours, you might think, well, they can respond whenever they want. But if you're a leader, you're putting pressure on them. People, we want to please. We usually want to please. So if I receive, okay, I'm independent expert, but if I receive from my client, from my high paying client or someone I care about, a message in some, I don't know, 1 in the morning, I might respond back just because. But that's not good. That's not healthy for us. So please take care of yourself and take care of your peers and colleagues. Create an environment where people can actually rest. And now with Zoom and everything, with back-to-back meetings, technology just emphasized all the crappy meeting practices that we employ. So it's kind of, the back-to-back meetings, usually you had the time when you walk between the meeting rooms, but now it's a button. Like psychologically, mentally, cognitively, you need to switch like this. And it's taking a toll if you're doing that all the time, and burnout comes easily. You don't even see it. It manifests differently in people. Some feel it like emotional burden, some feel it as disassociation from work. So it is something that's important. And that's why I stress it so much, and kind of please take care of yourself and your colleagues. And that has been the 5 points. And I see a lot of red. So maybe while I take a look at that, if Hugo, you'd like to share some of your reflections and thoughts.
No, first of all, thank you very much. And I was typing on the chat window that I'm curious about what Ben is writing on that whiteboard because he's taking notes all the time.
Yeah,
Ben, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah. So first off, I am a giant whiteboard nerd, and that's probably like one of the things that I'm missing most out of being at work. And so what I figured out, I think it was an Instagram ad I saw for one of these whiteboards that you can just stick to your wallet, like it's got sticky back. And so I bought one, and then I like I think accidentally fell into like putting my laptop then at like my chest height so I can stand up and then write at the whiteboard. And like euphoria for me has gone through the roof, and I've had, you know, issues like losing my marker caps and pens running out of ink, and it makes me feel like I'm back at work again. So I put this up here, and then it's actually evolved to, because I coach startups at Caterpillar. That's my day job. I also coach, internal startups. I mean, internal innovation teams, but also I coach a lot of external startups through University of Chicago. I'm based in Chicago and other places. And so I try to put relevant books like up on my little bookshelf here so that
it's a good selection. It's a good selection.
Yeah. So I bought this one, Hugo, after the Tendai Vicky session.
I need 10%. I need 10% of that revenue for sure. It's a good book, right? But you need to add Playing Lean to that shelf after this talk because Bruno, Playing Lean. It's a game. Bruno will get probably €1. No, regarding Bruno's points, any thoughts, Ben?
No, I totally agree. Like one of the things that I put into the chat was, so at Caterpillar, we used to have like a centralized innovation group, but Caterpillar is so big with 30 plus different business units that it was really hard for a centralized innovation group to focus on growing any one of those businesses. It got pulled in all sorts of different directions. And I think, financially, et cetera, that group got disbanded and dispersed into different areas of CAT. And so I am the innovation manager, but just for earth moving division, which is 4 product groups. And it allows me to assign a sponsor for each project, so that each project, we are working for a specific product group on each innovation project that we work on. And that to me has been a huge key to success, to making sure that our innovation is, like you said, is focused on high revenue possibilities. I think the downside, though, to doing that, some people have said, and we've debated, is that if we are only working on ideas that our leaders want us to work on, we might be blind to like the truly disruptive innovations out there. And so I was curious to get your guys' thoughts on that sort of topic.
So that is, I love this question because it's very, this is a problem that only big organizations have.
Yeah.
And again, I will share my opinion and what I prefer, the approach I prefer, and it's not supported by all innovation professionals or other experts. So one of the things I think is central units are dumb idea for innovation for this reason. You need to decide, I'm talking about organizational design. A unit is either going to earn money and have a P&L or it won't. If it doesn't have a P&L, then it's a service and support function. If you put in a service or support function, if you tell them go and earn money, no one is going to listen to them. They will get huge burden with no authority. And when you walk into a business unit and say, well, I want to help you make money, they will be like, I mean, that's nice. You can try it. So what I'm in favor of, and the setups that I have done and promoted, established, etc., is basically approach where in a business unit, they will be responsible. They will have innovators in a business unit, and the shared function is going to provide services. So the shared function is not supposed to create revenue, but it's supposed to help the innovators in a business unit do it. because that way you solve the duality problem. So the business unit will always focus on incremental innovation. There's nothing wrong with that. And my opinion is that no innovation units should focus on disruptive innovation. And I'll tell you why. Because disruptive innovation is difficult. Disruptive innovation, you will not have 20 disruptive ideas. You'll have one. And if you have one, then set up a venture that's supposed to go all damn in on that. Don't set up a global innovation manager that people will ask, well, what do you really do? Well, I'm trying to revolutionize cat, but at the same time, I'm supporting all 30 business areas. So that's my approach to it, because a big organization can deploy a multitude of tactics. It shouldn't be only one tactic. And of course, I mean, you see the dilemma in IT, centralized IT versus decentralized IT. So it is possible to take some of the solutions that have been deployed in that, but when specifically comes to innovation, I'm more in the favor of having deliberate action. I'm in the favor of, in the business unit, people innovate. In the shared function, people help them be the best at innovation. Yeah. And also when it comes to innovation, there are two worlds. There are two worlds that people, okay, the lean startup touches upon it a little bit, the startup way touches upon it more, but all these other books, Competing Against Luck, Talking to Humans, Testing with Humans, Pirates in the Navy, I haven't read it. They all focus on doing innovation, not on managing innovation. In big organizations, you have two job descriptions. You have the innovators that are supposed to be the best at processes like lean startup, customer development, design thinking. But you also need another group of people that's great at portfolio development, innovation accounting, innovation management, innovation strategy. Those are not the same skills. Of course, one person can have all of those skills, but it's unrealistic to expect that your 200 innovators will have all those skills. It's right. Like, you have people that love ideation and nothing else, and that's perfect. I mean, it's perfectly fine. People should be able to do whatever. But okay, now I went on a diatribe, so.
No, I like your and we don't do this at CAT yet, but it's one of my goals. Maybe it was for this year, but maybe next year, is to like when an idea gets to a certain point, we have to choose whether we're going to absorb it into the mothership, right, or should we spin it off into its own thing. We haven't yet done that. Everything gets absorbed into the mothership at this point. However, I've seen some other companies that do a good job and have a very defined decision point about whether it needs to go into the mothership or it will get spun off into a separate company where Caterpillar or whoever the company is would take an equity stake or whatever in the new firm. But then the incentives for corporate innovators are obviously capped, right? If I come up with a huge disruptive innovation, I don't get paid much more or really any more. And so like to really go after the disruptive innovations, because they're high risk, high reward, you almost need that startup incentive structure to make it worthwhile for the people going after it, which I think is pretty.
Completely agree. And that's why I'm in favor of setting up a separate venture for disruptive stuff, because then you can, it's exactly for that. Why I mean, working on disruptive stuff, working in general on entrepreneurship is such a difficult journey. It is difficult on the body, on the mind, on the heart and the soul. So there needs to be appropriate, equitable reward for people dedicating their life. People think disruptive innovation happens overnight. You'll need to work 10 to 15 years on that venture.
Right.
So it's, exactly the problem you described. And something you mentioned, I want to touch upon as well. So there are a few organizations that have very defined spin in, spin out, spin off criteria. And what I can share without going into too much details because of confidentiality is with big organization, there is the issue of scale. So when we talk about like 40 million annual recurring revenue, is that big or small? Well, it depends on the host organization, right? Yep. For a startup, it might be a dream. For maybe Caterpillar, it will be, if it's not a billion, it will not show up. Yeah. And that is something,
We run into that a lot with all of our like digital solutions. They, by themselves, they might be tens of millions of dollar business, but we're asking then our leaders to make that a priority to multi-billion-dollar businesses, and it's really hard to do. Like, it's really difficult.
Yeah. And that is kind of, again, why I'm in favor. For example, we will simplify this, so we're not working on Caterpillar right now, but
No,
I'm in
that's fine.
I'm in favor, like, business units having the clear innovation strategy, and that is in most cases like core, incremental, call it however you want, and that's perfectly fine. And I say why it's perfectly fine, because it builds the muscle. When you come with something disruptive, they will be more open to that, because they have learned how to do small steps within their own organization. And I mean, their bonuses and salaries are tied into the measures of their own business unit. So it's kind of, for me, I think it's important, the systems approach. So thinking about the whole corporate, the whole holding, the whole group needs to think, how can I do these things in different ways to be more successful overall? And that is something where it starts tripping, because we as humans, we do want to simplify. And that's why there are shared services, shared units, support units, because the point is to simplify, reduce cost, which usually doesn't increase the service, unfortunately. And with innovation, it's not as simple. You cannot just slap it somewhere and bam, it happens, because innovation is such a broad range of activities, from a new digital business to a new way to click a pen. I mean, both could be innovations, but at the completely different places in the organization and worldviews.
Any specific structure that you recommend? Imagine a large organization or a group
Mm.
with several different organizations,
Mm.
and you are responsible to design their innovation strategy, which includes their innovation structure.
Mm.
Is there a structure that you recommend? Meaning, where should sit the head of innovation? Every single organization inside that group should follow their own approach. How do you see this team?
Yeah.
It's one of the things that people usually ask me. I have
Mm.
my perspective. I would like to hear yours.
So again, here, potentially unpopular perspective. So in a large organization, in the ideal world, innovation wouldn't have a box of its own, because to me, innovation is tightly related to strategy. Strategy is another world like innovation, where everybody in this room will have three definitions for. But if we take a look at strategy as a set of decisions, activities, and behaviors to either achieve or overcome an issue, innovation would firmly be like this with strategy. So in ideal world, in whatever is the corporate strategy unit, and when I'm saying corporate strategy unit, I'm not thinking about the analytical strategy planning that was popular in the 80s and the 90s, but more modern approach, iterative strategy, evolutionary strategy. In the ideal world, they would be sitting together. So the chief strategy officer, or whoever, call it however, chief strategist or whatever chief role you want to invent, he would have a small team of people that are taking care, together with the heads of business units and the CEO and everybody. They're taking care of the present and the future, but they wouldn't have a P&L. So then I would trickle that down to the heads of business units, and each one of them would also have innovation capabilities. I'm talking about incremental, core. So they need to run the business, but they should also create a future of their business. But we're not talking a decade or 3 decades ahead the line. In addition to that, there could be a shared function that could be either reporting to chief strategist or have their head as well, which would support all these innovators. So I'm talking innovation coaches, service designers, UX, UI, kind of band of specialists, prototypers, because if you put them in IT, if you put them in HR, if you put them spread throughout your organization, it will be a nightmare to get them. When it comes to innovation, you need people in the business units that have rich and deep experience of the business, and couple them with a team that can transform thoughts and ideas into real stuff, into palpable stuff. So that startups don't have, small organizations don't have. What I've been doing is, in the big organization, let's say that someone in the business unit has an idea that's aligned with strategy and everything like that. You combine them with three persons that know the innovation process, you can crank that out in 3 to 12 weeks. In 3 to 12 weeks, just for cost of salary. No additional investment. For the cost of salary, you can create, test the idea, see if it should be invested in further. That's peanuts. It pebbles. And then the third thing, what I told before to Ben, uh, when it comes to actual, when you finally discover those beautiful disruption opportunities, those white spaces that you want to grab by the neck, set up a venture. Select, you need a total superstar, at least one, and you need, oh, I cannot swear on this call. From the group management, you need to select the person who is not the most innovative, because that doesn't matter at all. You need to select the person that absolutely everybody respects. That's the champion you need. You need the person that walks in the room and everybody goes and listens to what that person has to say. You don't need the innovation mastermind to be the champion, because when the going gets tough, like in this pandemic, these kind of things are on the chopping block first, and you need someone who, just by his or her presence, people will say, well, we will not even ask, for it. And that goes for innovation, transformation projects, whatever. Okay, does
Yeah,
that make
because
sense to you?
it does make sense. In particular, that sentence of not putting the innovator leading the whole thing, because usually perceive the innovator as the crazy guy in the room. So he's not respected many times. So that's a very good recommendation, advice for all of us.
Well, thank you for
Guys,
the question. It is a good question.
Yeah. And there's no single answer. I think there are perspectives. Then there's culture. It might be something in Europe. It might be different in Japan, etc.
Completely agree.
All right, guys, feel free to unmute and ask questions to the expert in the room. It's Bruno. It's not me. And Ben, of course, Ben is ready to answer everything. I guess we have Ben's support.
Hi,
Marco.
everybody. It was great to join this. Thanks, Ugo, for inviting, and Bruno, congratulations for your speech. I was wondering more about these venture ideas within the corporate. So you said the first the right guy to drive with how he's perceived from everybody. And who else is important to have in this venture?
Okay, so when we're talking about corporate ventures, there are many different types. When I was talking here is specifically a venture that's set up and completely owned by the company itself. In addition to that, it's possible to do joint ventures. So now there are businesses called venture studios that partner with large corporates exactly to do things like that. So they usually have shared ownership. And then there is corporate venture capital, which is actually investing in specifically buying ventures that you believe are aligned with the strategy. I will answer your question from the perspective of completely owned venture, so that I, as a business, am setting up on my own venture. So this is serious business, and it should be conducted for serious business. That means that the stakes should be out there, presented immediately. Sometimes the person that came up with the idea is not the person to actually lead or develop or even be in the venture. So that it's important to have these discussions early. What I say put at least one superstar to lead it. Why do I use superstar? In most organizations, if you walk in and ask for a superstar, people are able to point a finger. You don't need to explain them what a superstar means. But for sake of this discussion, it would include a person that's well versed in the business they're in, that's well versed in different methodologies, innovation, at least one methodology, that is able to politically navigate the organization, not in a dishonest way, but in an honest way. So a person, I'm not talking about someone who is looking for nicer words, but it's difficult to find them. Not someone who sucks up to everybody in the organization, but someone who knows how to respectfully navigate. I mean, big organizations have layers. However, look, in Norway, businesses are pretty flat, but it's still 3 to 4 layers. You still need to know how to navigate them. So you really need jack of all trades that's also very good at a lot of them. That is kind of at least one person, and everything else depends on the business itself. So that's what I would go with. Nothing here too fancy or too difficult, and the key is growing it appropriately. That is the most difficult thing for ventures that are completely owned by big businesses, because they have so much resources. They're eager. Okay, this is opportunity, let's jump on it. Bam, 20-30 people inside. You don't need a venture to start with 20 people. You can start a venture, even a corporate venture, with 5 employees. And then what's more important with corporate ventures 100% owned is actually how you steer them. How do you set it up? Do you set up a whole management board and supervision board or not? That is the $1 million question. And this is where, kind of, if you go with the route of setting up a board, the board chairman and the champion should be the type of person I described earlier. And then 4 other board members, 2 should be some sort of domain experts, and 2 should be related to completely outside of the business. They shouldn't be from the organization. They should be, I don't know, Bill Gates, people like that. You want some people that have experience, that have taken ventures to the market, that have experience growing in difficult conditions. So that's the ideal setup. Does that answer your question? Is that helpful?
Oh, definitely helpful. Thanks. How much time would you give to the venture?
I would go with metered funding model. That's usually what I do with internal startups. So it's kind of, it works for external startups as well. So are you familiar with the product life cycle or similar? Okay, so just for this example, we'll use conventional product life cycle. So that's what is it? Market introduction, market growth, market is it decline? No, market decline is last. So kind of tying to specific investment to specific timeline. And I'm not talking timeline here in saying 3 months or 5 months or something like that, but specific milestones. So what we have learned from the lean startup and entrepreneurship in general, reaching problem solution fit first, then product market fit next. Don't invest in scale before product market fit and all these things. So that is how investment should be tied into time. If you're talking honestly about disruptive things, everybody's surprised by time, but we're talking maybe 3 years. That's what we're talking. 3 years before scale. That's what we're potentially looking at. Maybe even longer. If we're honestly talking about disruptive, paradigm changing venture, it will not happen in 6 months unless there is a traumatic event like pandemic, World War III, I don't know, brutal economic crisis, and etc. So instead of focusing on time, I would rather focus on specifically reaching these milestones, and then, well, that's what we are giving you money for. And this is another thing, how corporate can reclaim their investment. So money is spent, but if they're able to extract the learning from the venture back in the organization to change existing business, how business is done, how value is creation, whatever, they're able to reuse that knowledge and actually reclaim their investments. The problem is, because of the way accounting is done, that will not show up on a balance sheet. And that's the whole problem, and what innovation accounting is trying to address, hopefully in the future, if it becomes a wide practice. But that's one of the challenges, and it requires a lot of thinking upfront, thinking backwards as well. And yes, there's plenty of challenges.
Yeah, innovation accounting is not mainstream yet. Dan Thoma, Dan Thoma probably, right?
Yeah, I'm writing a chapter in his book.
Oh my God! Of course you are.
So we are working pretty hard on managerial innovation accounting. A lot of challenges out there.
When I'm coaching teams, I have a chart for it, right? Like as stuff gets more mature, the funding can go up, and at the beginning, like, not only can you do that stuff for small amounts of money, I like to say you have to do it for small amounts of money, because if you overfund an early stage idea, whether it's within a big company like Caterpillar or an external startup, that investor is going to start asking, where's my return? Where's my return? And you're going to be expected to build something, even though you may not know what you need to build yet, if it's too early.
100%. And just to add one saying to what Ben was sharing, because I think it's a beautiful one: spend ideas, not money. and that perfectly comes into that thinking. So as I said, I'm coming from the lean manufacturing background, and Toyota has a practice which is as brutal as its genius. And that is, this is an example. So let's say that you have a part of the manufacturing line and you have 7 workers working on it. So at the moment when they reach maximum efficiency or the best performance, you take one person permanently. Chaos happens, performance falls, and now these 6 people need to spend their creativity and ideas to not only come but overcome previous performance level. When that happens and that is stable and standardized, take 1 person away, 5 people, repeat the process, and then going all the way until you cannot remove 1 more person when it becomes impossible. The thing that happens is that a work with 3 people might be very different from the work with 7 people, but the performance is going to also be very different. And this the same is for innovation. You need to create this environment where they feel they have nothing left. I'm not talking about emotional support, but when you think, unfortunately, to World War II and kind of a lot of ingenious ideas that happened during that period, you know, planes from wood, planes from different type of materials, planes from the things that we have around instead of the best materials that we can get in the market. That's that thinking, spending ideas, not money, like really focusing to extract that creativity. Because sometimes they say, like, people say, I'm not creative, I'm not this bullshit.
No worries, we love that. We get more views by swearing, so that's fine.
I'm really, you know, I'm working on reducing that. I get too passionate, but people say I'm not creative, but it's everybody is wrong. We as humans, that's innate ability. Everybody is imaginative, but our ability to express that is different because of our upbringing, because of education systems, because of our society. So that happens differently everywhere, but everybody has that in themselves. How creative and imaginative we are might be different between each one of us, but to say that someone is not, it's just wrong. And it is unfortunately the toughest of environments that bring that out of that. And then where it becomes challenging, and this is beautiful. So I'm doing a doctorate in corporate innovation and organizational change, and I'm doing a lot of research on human psychology, mind, emotions, etc. And I was reading a brilliant piece about difference between Jesuitical and Benedictine education. So one is very punishing, you know, discipline and punishment. If you do something bad, you got hit by a ruler or you get punished, silence, etc. Another one is completely loving, like you can do whatever you want. We love you, we love you, we love you, and you learn in that environment. And what Casey was writing about, that in general, loving environment is good, but in one moment, in order to reach breakthrough, you need to have pain. And that is something that's especially in the world of innovation. So when I say difficult environment, I'm not talking being punishing to each other, like emotionally abusing each other, expecting return on investment in 3 months and things like that. I'm saying that environment needs to be safe and loving. You know what we say, learning from failure, accepting that things will not go with innovation as they should go, being able to change from that. That's the loving environment. But the tough environment needs to come in form of resources. Resources, again, here where you should be loving is providing innovation capability. Where you should be tough is providing money. You have the salary, that's the investment you have. Go and make wonders. In the next stage, like Ben said, you can get more investment. You don't need to buy new technology to reach problem solution fit. You need to buy new technology to reach scale. That was just an example. It's not a hard rule. But yes, again, I went a bit off, but I wanted to share.
No, yeah. I have a question talking about ideas. So when there's a proper culture and people can contribute with ideas, and when there's a, let's say, proper maturity as well, I can submit my idea to an innovation management platform or something like that. So imagine an organization with 10,000 employees submitting every single employee one idea per day. We have 10,000 ideas on how to improve the core business, disruptive ideas. So from your experience, what's the best method to select and review ideas? Because that can take a lot of time, or we can miss the right idea because we don't have time to go through all of these ideas. I brought here a few weeks ago Itonic's innovation, and they are trying to bring AI, but to select and review ideas in foresight as well. What's your experience about this important step in the innovation funnel?
Okay. Here again, I have unpopular opinion.
We love that. We love that. More views, even more views.
Okay. So you said a hypothetical case, but I'll be discussing that hypothetical case. You said 10,000 ideas a day. So that goes out of control really fast. If you're submitting that for review, that's a waste. That's creating waste. So what needs to be differentiated, and it's difficult when we move into incremental innovation, core innovation, and that is continuous improvement. I don't want to say versus, but in this case, it really is versus innovation. So changes for the better that are related to your immediate workplace, you should do them right now. No one should prioritize them. If this is change of your workplace for the better, you shouldn't have to ask, unless there is life at stake, you shouldn't have to ask for anyone's permission, except maybe your team leader. So that's one thing. So kind of going back to Toyota production system, lean manufacturing, Kaizens and everything, it is the team that's doing the work that has actually the right to implement their own improvements or not. So that's the first thing. When it comes to innovative ideas, my firm belief is that prioritizing is a waste of time. What you first need, you need to set up a series of filters, like a strategic filter. Is it aligned with the strategy? Is it aligned with what we want to do? If it passes all those filters, then it makes sense to prioritize. For example, prioritizing 90 ideas versus prioritizing 20 ideas is a big difference, especially, Ben mentioned, and we mentioned the different investment levels. So the more you go, the bigger the investment is, the more it makes sense to spend more time on prioritizing, analyzing, etc. But if you're proposing to change a color of this, come on, I don't need like cost benefit analysis. I don't need sign off from the CEO of 100,000 person company. So that is kind of, yes, AI and digital solutions might bring some solution to that, but really here I suggest using our brains and creativity. First, empower people that are on the line, that are close to the call agents, everybody that's close to the customer, to do small changes to their work. And I mentioned call centers, so this is a trivial example. For example, call centers have everything standardized. It's inhumane. I honestly don't like working that much with call centers because our inhumanity comes to the maximum there. In call centers, in most of the companies, even in countries like Norway, your piss break is counted in seconds. Your sandwich break is counted in seconds. I'm talking Norway, Germany. I'm not talking some country that you would think, oh, brutal exploitation of children and whatnot. I'm talking about our countries, right? And there, everything is standardized, including, for example, how you take off your headset and where you place it. So if the person doing that has a better way to do it, they shouldn't have to ask for permission from manager's manager to improve that. That's kind of where I'm going at with this example. So in general, if you have 10,000 ideas a day, you should stop it. Because another thing that happens is, what I came to experience and immediately work with my clients is, when we give our ideas, we give part of ourselves. So when you submit idea, you give part of your ego, part of your heart, part of your contribution. And the worst that can happen is not getting a no, but being ignored. So someone asked me for my opinion, for my idea how to make your business better, even though I'm an employee, and I gave you that. And then no one told me anything. I don't even know, is it yes? Is it a no? So that's one of the first things that I work on, because it's such an easy fix. You just need to say, even you can say, we received so many ideas, it will take us 2 weeks to go through all of them. And then we will tell you if you're going or not going. People don't mind if you tell them no, but they do take to heart if you ignore them. And then the next time you organize a hackathon, ideathon, innovation challenge, they will be like, ooh, last time I did it, nothing really happened. I mean, I might go because there will be good food and after party, and I can get wasted for free on corporate budget. But okay, this was a bit of a side detour, but I think it's important to share kind of how we treat each other.
No, I love that too. The other thing I might add is I sometimes I treat myself as an internal consultant to other parts of Caterpillar. And so they're paying me to evaluate the best ideas for the business. And so a lot of times, even if I have 10,000 ideas, I would go to the sponsor, the head of that business unit, and say, like, which of these keeps you up at night, right? Which of these is like, and then that really aligns the innovation for success when we try to solve that problem for the business. And I don't know, that was another thought that popped into my head.
Thank you for sharing.
How do you see innovation in government, in highly regulated, including defense and security, in these type of organizations in turbulent times? What can they do? What should they change? What's happening in Norway? We talk a lot about corporate or private organizations, but what about those organizations that not aim to have a profit, but they aim to help people or to protect the country? What should change?
It's a good question, important one. It's also a political question, but I'll try to involve politics, but not in a partisan way, right? So it's kind of the role of government, and what's the role of the government in the well-being of the actual country, and etc. So Norway is doing a lot of good things, or trying a lot of good things. Norway is unique in the way that it has the richest fund in the world. That's usually known as oil fund, but it's actually a pension fund. That's the formal name. And they're so big that whatever they do, it goes well, because just because of their size. There is something called Innovation Norway, which is active almost all over the world, and they do have a lot of budgets set aside for investments in innovative projects, and they're earnestly trying to kind of motivate innovation in specific areas. So Norway is quite conscious of the green agenda, of the blue agenda, so they're trying to invest in that. They put tens of millions to the side. But in general, when it comes to innovation, really the best is in my opinion, the best for public sector is to stay out of it as much as possible, and to involve regulations where harm might be done. So it's quite I wouldn't say I have conflicted stance, but for example, looking at privacy, right? So GDPR and everything related to it, I'm happy for it from the perspective of a user. I'm happy that Facebook is having very difficult time. I'm happy that all these businesses are having very difficult time. At the same time, from the business perspective, I'm also like, ooh, how to work with this. Now if we're talking about rapid prototyping, now you also need to think, where is actually the data going to go? I cannot just take KISS metrics or something and slap it on my product to follow the analytics. I might need to use Matomo or something that's hosted, self-hosted, maybe on a server in Germany with additional certificates. So yeah, it complicates some of these things, but at the same time, I do believe it protects me as individual. So back to your question, I see two questions there: involvement of government in innovation of private companies, and innovation within government themselves. When it comes to their involvement in private innovation, what Innovation Norway does is, I think, the maximum extent a country should go to. So it's trying to influence where innovation happens. So Norway has in their long-term strategy that they want to come up with new sources of energy, that they want to come up with new ways to both treat the oceans, but also benefit from the oceans. And they're putting millions and millions and millions of euros in that. That's perfectly fine. Innovation within public sector, they don't have the revenue generation, but they should still be focused on wealth generation and value creation. And unfortunately, in most of the governments, the easiest way to do that is to look at reducing the bureaucracy. So bureaucracy is just a response to inefficiencies. It's inefficient response to inefficiencies. So something didn't work, and now you want basically to write down 3 different ways that you will try to make that work, and then it doesn't work again. It's like just look at procurement processes. It's like, oh yeah.
I know the pain. Yeah, in many different countries, not just one.
Yeah,
countries are very similar in Europe. After living in 3 different countries and working in more than 10 in Europe, I can tell you guys that things are really similar. One last question, because I think Bruno wants to have dinner, or almost breakfast, maybe.
It's not that late, but dinner would be.
Dinner will be fine. Yeah. Everybody's quiet now and shy.
It sounded like you would ask the last question, but it's an invitation to anybody to ask a question. Maybe someone who is quiet, if someone dares.
Yeah. Or just ask Bruno what's his dinner all about. Ben, come on. It's what? It's 1 p.m. in the US.
Oh yeah, 1 p.m. Well, I'm still hungry, but it's lunch for me instead of dinner.
It's lunch.
I'm going back to one of the things you said about, and I'm thinking, and I was just talking this morning about, especially in the capitalism in the US and the stock market and quarterly results, and how I have trouble getting people to focus on a 3-year disruptive innovation when we need something in 6 months, right? And I was using the example of Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, as an example of a very refreshing book for me to say, okay, we've got it. Like, stock market prices quarter over quarter is not the only way to measure business success here, right? So, and that we should be having that infinite game mindset where it's much more about, what is the right maybe long-term investment coupled with short-term health, but curious to kind of get your thoughts on that whole space, or maybe how much is that in Norway and Europe versus here in Chicago in the US?
Well, it's another contentious topic, right? So the dominant narrative is that long term is better than the short term. But if you look at actual data and numbers, now when we're talking about performance, there is a reason why short term is triumphant, because there is no evidence that long term is actually better than short term. That short termism doesn't actually create the destruction it does. Now, I'm not talking about environmental destruction and everything that came out of it, which is important as well. Another thing that's important to remember is the history. And here America is important, or specifically USA is important, because it was actually the place where a lot of corporate strategy was born, or more specifically developed. Like McKinsey and all the big consulting houses were present in USA. Of course, they were present in Europe as well. And a lot of great thinkers came from the Great Britain, like Gary Hamel, Andrew Campbell, and the whole gang. There was like from London Business School, etc. But long range planning or strategic planning was booming in the 80s and the 90s. And that one was selling the promise of the long view, thinking and planning for the future, but it backfired. So it didn't work out. And then, once you have an executive burning on a method or something, that method never really catches up on again. So, and my opinion is that instead of trying to fight this, and in general, all approaches where, oh, you suck, you need to change or something, don't really work. So I'm more in the favor of going, okay, there is a reason why short-term financial performance is looked and played at. But as you said, there are different ways to measure business success. So looking at the long term, what I like, I think it's Menlo Park, Menlo Innovations, or was it 3M? So we're talking about innovation measures, innovation metrics. So for example, they had a measure that uh, in the last 5 years, at least 30% of revenue should come from new products, services, and innovations. So for example, that's one simple way of, you can say, well, long-term thinking isn't that new or dramatic. Just look at what these guys are doing. It's just that it happens and manifests differently. When it comes to incremental innovation and to regular business, I personally am in favor of quarterly, but the quarterly should not destroy the future. There is no excuse to make a decision now that will ruin us in the future. That's just a dumb manager. And that's not a side effect of short-term thinking. That's a side effect of bad education, bad training, and bad leadership. So that's my opinion and take
Right.
on it.
Maybe I'm asking how to deal with bad managers.
Yes, it's a good question, and I think that you have it better in USA than we have it in Europe, because in USA, for better or worse, firing culture is pretty strong. You
Yeah.
walk in, you slap someone, and they're out. Okay, without the slap, it's like proverbial slap. In Norway, you cannot technically. It's almost impossible to fire someone. That's good and bad. Toyota, I'm using Toyota a lot because I think they're a great example of a company that was in complete bottom. So Japan pre-war World War II and even after World War II was not known for quality. It was Sony, Toyota, and that whole gang that actually brought Japan to the world level and say, like, oh, it's actually quality products. But Toyota went through some really, really difficult times where the president had to resign. It was a great scandal. And what came out of it was that every employee was for life. So it ended up that they have every employee for life, which then meant that we need to invest in all these people because they will be with us for life. So it makes sense. But both in USA and Europe, job hopping is normal because that's how you get salary increase. It's faster to change a job after 2 years, get a salary increase, move up a management level than it is to stay within a company. And even within a company, because people try to retain talent, and then it's within organization, and that's a big company thing. I'm sure you know it at CAT, where you
Yeah.
can move not between the departments, but between the business units. So you invested in, I don't know, private banking. You invest 2 years in someone, in their innovation capabilities, and they move from private banking to, I don't know, wealth management. So you realistically lost the talent. It's still within the group, but it's somewhere else. They need to relearn it. So I don't have a solution to that, but in general, what changes is how long we are in the work, how long people stay in their own workplace. And when it comes to innovation, yes, there are things that come out of network, of connections, of seeing different things. But disruptive innovation does come from intimate relationship with the business.
Mhm.
So like the aha moment, like I have a big beef with aha moments. Like people are, oh, Bruno, when was the last time you had a aha moment? And I'm like, well, almost never, but not because I'm stupid or ignorant, but because I'm learning all the time. So if I'm learning all the time, it's like, like small, small, small. So it's like all these small things, eventually after 20 years, it'll be like you wake up and, oh, I haven't thought of that. Now it makes sense. And I always think back to my high school. So in high school, I was for electrical engineer, and I had automation. I don't know if there are any engineers here, but automation is a bunch of coding. Okay, you know what it is. So I passed the class in the high school, but I didn't get it at all. It was like bunch of mathematics and kind of okay, and then something happens. I passed it. And then at university, I had it again. And just one moment, I was like, oh, that's what it was. And I passed with flying colors. So, it needs time. People forget it needs maturity. So I've been training martial arts for more than 26 years. I'm a martial arts instructor. And people think that just because they see a pattern, they can repeat it. Your brain gets it. but you haven't tried it 1,000 times. Your body will not be able to repeat it. They think the same with innovation. They see us working with tools, with canvases, with approaches, coming up with interview scripts, doing experiments together with them. It seems so easy. And then they think, I've seen it once, I did it once, I can do it myself. You can't do it yourself, not because you're stupid, but because you are not practiced. And there is no shortcuts to practice. It just doesn't exist. We haven't found that. Everybody needs to practice. So in martial arts, I can show you a roll, I can show you a throw. You will get it, but you will not repeat it immediately after. And you will need a lot of repetitions to get it right. And then you will need even more to get it at the expert level. So yes, that went completely off the tracks, but
no, you are a black belt or 5th dan, 7th dan. I can see that we can all see that. I think we also have to dash because Bruno wants to eat.
Oh yes, adrenaline and then gets lost.
No,
Thank you
I
very
think
much,
it
guys, for all the questions.
Great. Thank you for your time, Bruno. Thank you everybody for joining. I will watch this video again because this was a masterclass, another masterclass here at the Innovation Cafe. Okay.
Thank you very much,
guys, and see you next week. Thank you very much.
All the best.